Live television is designed to look safe. Every camera angle, every cue, every movement is planned. In this episode, we're examining moments when that control slipped quietly, turning an ordinary broadcast into a fatal situation before anyone realized it was too late. It was August 14th, 2015, in downtown Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A street demonstration had escalated into scattered violence by early evening. Police lines shifted block by block while local stations stayed live. The assignment looked routine, but the street geometry, crowd flow, and fading light were already limiting control. Rachel Keegan was 32 years old, a general assignment reporter for a regional affiliate. She covered zoning hearings, winter storms, and school closures. Live shots were not her specialty, but staffing shortages put her in the field. She was careful, methodical, and relied on preparation rather than presence. Her employer expected continuous coverage. Advertisers had bought the hour. Producers wanted proximity without obstruction. Rachel wore a station-branded vest and held a wired microphone connected to a shoulder camera. She had no personal security. The setup relied on police maintaining distance between the press and the moving crowd. The disturbance centered on a four-way intersection bordered by closed storefronts and a bus shelter. Trash fires burned intermittently. Traffic signals failed. Officers redirected groups south, then west, creating cross-currents. Rachel was positioned near a curb cut to keep the camera stable and the background readable. Later reviews confirmed police radio traffic included reports of bladed weapons taken from nearby shops. The information did not reach the field crew in real time. Producers asked for a tighter shot as the crowd compressed behind Rachel. She stepped half a pace forward to keep the lens clear of passing bodies. The live broadcast shows a man emerging from the left edge of the frame. He wore a hooded jacket despite the heat and moved against the prevailing flow. His right arm stayed close to his body. He closed the distance quickly, visible across a few frames of footage, using the bus shelter as cover. The first contact was not a shove. The blade entered the left side of Rachel's neck just below the jawline. Review found the angle downward and inward consistent with a short thrust. The camera jolted as the operator lifted the rig. Blood appeared immediately, dark and forceful. Rachel dropped the microphone. She staggered backward 2 steps and collapsed onto the pavement. The assailant disengaged and ran north, visible for several frames before leaving view. The broadcast lag continued for 12 seconds, capturing Rachel supine and motionless as blood spread beneath her head. Police in the intersection reached her within moments as part of crowd control. The area was secured, and the feed was cut at the control room. Paramedics arrived from a nearby post, initiated airway control, and applied pressure. But there was no effective response. Transport followed immediately under protocols. The medical examiner documented a penetrating neck wound that severed the carotid artery and damaged the jugular vein. The blade also nicked the cervical spine. Rapid blood loss caused loss of consciousness within seconds. Death occurred shortly thereafter despite immediate medical care. The suspect was arrested later that night using footage from multiple cameras and transit video. The knife was recovered in a drainage grate along the escape route. Charges included first-degree intentional homicide. An internal review found no violation of policy but identified gaps. Live positioning placed reporters at choke points without escape lanes. Audio delays prevented field crews from receiving threat updates. The station revised protocols to require standoff distances and hard-cut rules during crowd compression. City officials revised media access during unrest, clarifying permits and standardizing buffer zones. Stations added broadcast delays, fixed exit lanes, and new training on crowd movement and lighting. The footage remains a reference for newsroom risk reviews, with policy updates circulated statewide within months. Rachel Keegan was killed in the open air, surrounded by police, cameras, and preparation that assumed distance would hold. The next story moves away from crowds and violence to a calm shoreline, where danger built quietly beneath the surface and confidence replaced caution. It was September 2nd, 2018, at Oceanside Pier, California. The segment aired live during a morning broadcast. Waves looked manageable on camera, sunlight flattening their edges. Framing suggested control, but shifting currents and tightening timing pushed a planned demonstration into open water risk before production adjusted positions while on-air coverage continued. Evan Cole was 27 years old, a volunteer EMT from Vista, California. He worked a warehouse job during the week and took unpaid EMT shifts on weekends to gain experience. He trained after work, kept certifications current, and swam regularly at a local pool. Supervisors described him as steady on routine calls. He followed rescue training videos and sought exposure for future fire department applications. He did not hold ocean rescue certification. The live segment was sponsored by a regional safety nonprofit and a surfwear company promoting beach awareness. Producers planned a brief rescue demonstration for the broadcast. The intent was to show how responders assist a swimmer in trouble, with Evan acting as the simulated distressed swimmer during the segment. He agreed after brief coordination with on-duty lifeguards. He did not disclose a history of asthma, and no briefing addressed how open ocean conditions differ from pool or shallow water drills. That morning, a beach hazard statement was posted. The statement warned of lateral rip currents near fixed coastal structures. From shore, conditions looked manageable. Skies were clear, winds light, and sets evenly spaced. Despite the statement, the live segment proceeded. The setup placed Evan beyond the sandbar to create visible distance. This removed firm footing and limited exits once cameras were live. Viewers watched Evan enter the water and swim outward as planned. As he crossed the sandbar, the wave height increased slightly. Live overhead shots showed his position shifting sideways, though forward motion continued. The drift was subtle in the air and became clear only later when compared to fixed landmarks. The broadcast continued without interruption. When Evan turned back toward shore, the current strengthened. On the live feed, his body moved diagonally while his overall position drifted toward the pier. His arms and legs remained active. He angled away, but the lateral pull continued. A larger wave lifted him. His feet lost contact. The wave carried him forward and sideways at once. The impact occurred at chest height against the pier pilings, visible on the live feed. His head struck the piling at an angle. The contact caused immediate loss of muscle control. Purposeful movement stopped. He did not regain the surface under his own power. Whitewater passed over him, pushing his torso against submerged pier pilings. Additional waves crossed the same area before access was possible. When Evan was moved clear of the pilings, there was no voluntary movement. Assessment showed no spontaneous breathing. He was stabilized on scene and transported under beach medical protocols already active for the live segment. The feed continued briefly due to control room delay and safety procedures before cutting. Later review confirmed a single head strike followed by loss of motion. The medical examiner documented a fracture at the base of the skull. The injury damaged the spinal cord, stopping breathing immediately. Loss of consciousness occurred at impact. Water in the lungs showed drowning followed by respiratory arrest, not preceding it. The injury pattern matched wave-driven impact with a fixed object, not exhaustion, cramping, or a medical episode. Afterward, Evan's EMT unit suspended water-based demonstrations. Training materials were revised to address rip currents, pier hazards, and authority to halt activities during advisories. The case was added to recertification training without identifying Evan by name. The program issued a safety notice and permanently removed the segment. Local agencies reviewed beach broadcast policies. Warning flags now remain in place during surf advisories regardless of filming activity. Evan Cole entered the water believing training and visibility would be enough. His death came from forces that moved sideways, not forward. The next failure happened indoors, above ground, where smoke moved faster than flame and escape narrowed by the minute. It was July 18, 2016, in Cleveland, Ohio. A 6-alarm apartment fire burned upward through the morning, sirens steady, cameras already waiting below. Nothing suggested spectacle yet. From the street, the building remained intact as coverage continued. Marcus Levin was 34, a night shift HVAC technician who serviced grocery stores, clinics, and aging office buildings after hours. His work involved belts, coils, and keeping systems running quietly overnight. He usually worked alone, followed strict routines, and avoided attention. He lived alone in a mid-rise apartment and had mild asthma. His gray rescue cat was the reason he returned after the fire began. The fire started 2 floors below Marcus's unit due to an electrical failure inside a breaker panel. Smoke rose through the stairwell faster than flames, reducing oxygen on the upper floors first. By the time local stations cut to live coverage, firefighters were still staging outside and had not advanced hose lines to Marcus's floor. The live broadcast framed the building from street level. Anchors described smoke conditions while the camera held a wide shot of upper windows, a standard practice during multi-alarm fires to monitor fire spread. Residents were visible at several windows. The feed remained live and uninterrupted. Marcus entered the building during this window. Fire alarms were active. Some residents were evacuating downward, others hesitated, slowing clearance above the fire. Marcus reached his unit, closed the door, and placed towels at the base to slow the smoke. Inside, visibility dropped to inches. He searched briefly for the cat. Outside, the live camera continued rolling. Heat built behind interior walls. Window glass softened in frames. Thermal imaging used by firefighters later showed ceiling temperatures inside Marcus's unit rising rapidly, weakening fixtures and igniting rollover conditions. On the live broadcast, a figure appeared at a 6th floor window. Viewers saw Marcus force the window open and lean outward, shirt over his face. Flames rolled across the ceiling behind him, visible through the glass. The camera did not zoom. It remained wide as producers monitored multiple windows at once. Conditions inside became unsurvivable. As fire spread across the ceiling, Marcus climbed onto the windowsill. Soot patterns later showed sustained heat exposure rather than a slip. Blistering on his skin matched radiant heat injury before the fall, indicating prolonged exposure and limited time for escape. With the camera already live, viewers saw Marcus standing fully outside the window. Seconds later, his body dropped straight down through the frame. The fall was captured in real time. Rotation occurred once during descent, consistent with an uneven push from the sill. He struck the sidewalk at a steep angle, with force transferring through his body almost simultaneously. The impact caused catastrophic trauma and occurred entirely within the live shot. The camera shook briefly before the feed was cut as control room staff confirmed what had happened. Fire crews already operating at street level reached the sidewalk as part of ongoing suppression. The feed was cut shortly after. Marcus showed no movement. Medical assessment found no breathing or circulation. The coroner documented catastrophic axial trauma, including fractures to the lower extremities, pelvis, spine, and skull. The head injury occurred at impact, causing immediate loss of brain function and instantaneous death. Investigators later confirmed the electrical origin of the fire and ruled the death accidental. The cat was found alive under a couch during overhaul operations. The live broadcast footage was later restricted, but it had already aired, capturing the moment a routine fire update turned fatal in real time. We've got more on-camera tragedies coming, so subscribe if you want to see how planned coverage breaks down in real time. It was March 9th, 2014, in Des Moines, Iowa. A live charity telethon filled the hall with applause and lights. Nothing appeared wrong. Schedules were tight, queues rushed, and safety decisions were quietly bent to keep the broadcast moving forward, despite visible warning signs today. Lily Moreno was 11 years old. She was small, quiet, and consistent in training. She practiced 4 nights a week at a neighborhood dance and acrobatic studio that emphasized repetition and discipline, not aerial work. Her mother cleaned dental equipment overnight. Her father managed freight schedules. Performing felt like Lily's contribution. She focused on preparation, sewing costume details by hand, and meeting expectations rather than standing out. The studio owner encouraged Lily to appear at a regional charity telethon for exposure. Local sponsors covered travel and costumes, not equipment or safety setup. The Civic Arts Center was familiar but outdated. Lily had only performed aerial routines at low heights over mats, using temporary supports. She had never worked from fixed overhead rigging and relied entirely on instructors who said the setup was safe. On the morning of the telethon, the children's segment was pushed back several times as the schedule shifted. Donation totals were rising, and producers wanted to keep viewers watching through the later blocks. The aerial rigging arrived a few hours before broadcast. It was mounted into a ceiling truss designed for static lighting loads, not the dynamic forces created by a drop sequence. No load test was conducted. No structural engineer reviewed the installation. The anchor point was treated as adequate without verification, despite time pressure and the absence of load testing. Lily was moved to the final slot in the children's segment. This decision was made to maintain audience interest before a major donation update. Backstage, Lily prepared as usual. She chalked her hands and checked the borrowed silks. The anchor point was hidden above banners and stage lighting. No secondary attachment or backup line was visible in the performance area. There was no safety net beneath the rig. By the time Lily stepped onto the stage, the cameras were already live. She climbed smoothly. The silks responded as expected. Her movements were controlled and practiced. She reached the planned height, secured her wrap, and paused briefly before beginning the release. The move was designed to drop and stop mid-air, using friction and body position to control descent. Instead, the anchor failed immediately. The attachment pulled free from the truss without warning. Wood fibers tore as the improperly rated hardware pulled free from the structure under sudden load. The failure happened faster than any correction could occur. Lily fell nearly straight down, head first with minimal rotation. There was no meaningful deceleration before impact. The fall was captured by multiple fixed cameras. Her head struck the stage first. The force compressed her neck and drove her skull downward. Her body folded forward on impact and came to rest where it landed. Blood pooled beneath her head within seconds. There was no visible movement after impact. The silks fell beside her as the detached hardware hit the stage nearby. The broadcast feed cut shortly afterward. Access to the stage area was restricted. Event staff followed standard procedures used for medical emergencies during live programs. Lily showed no response during the assessment. Medical examination later confirmed the injuries were unsurvivable. The base of the skull was crushed on impact. Severe brain swelling was present. The bones of the neck were fractured from vertical compression. Breathing stopped at the moment of impact. The medical examiner ruled the death immediate. The center closed that night for inspection. Investigators documented improper anchoring, lack of redundancy, and the absence of engineering oversight. Records showed no verification of load ratings for the installed rigging and no approval process for aerial equipment. The telethon raised significant funds but permanently removed aerial acts from future programs. Local safety requirements for school and community venues were revised within months. Lily's parents settled civil claims without public statements. Settlement funds were directed toward mandatory rigging inspections for regional auditoriums. Lily's name now appears on safety checklists used before performances, attached to procedures meant to prevent another fall. Lily Moreno fell because nothing stopped her once the system gave way. The final story does not involve height or equipment, but Earth itself, where a hillside collapsed during a live storm report, burying people who believed shelter meant safety. It was October 12, 2017, in a hillside barangay outside Cagayan de Oro, Philippines. A slow-moving tropical storm had parked over the region since dawn. Rain fell steadily, not violently, the kind that soaks the ground before anyone notices the danger building underneath. The area sat along a narrow road cut into a slope that had been reshaped years earlier to make space for small stores and homes. The hill above was a mix of clay soil and loose fill, held in place by shallow vegetation and aging concrete drains. Landslides were not unusual in the province, but this section had never failed before. The regional station sent a small crew to document flooding in low-lying neighborhoods. Maria Liza Santos, a 29-year-old reporter assigned to storm coverage, stood near a row of roadside stores that had pulled down their metal shutters. The live shot framed the road, the hillside, and water running through open gutters. The goal was to show conditions without moving into flooded zones. Several residents had gathered inside one corner store to stay out of the rain. The structure was a single-story concrete shell with a light steel roof, built directly against the slope. Its rear wall doubled as a retaining surface, though it had never been engineered for that role. Inside were Maribel de la Cruz, 41, Josephine Josie Ramirez, 38, and Ryan Flores, 15, all locals who lived uphill and had come down when the rain worsened. Rainfall records later showed accumulation exceeding safe limits for slope stability. Drainage channels above the road were clogged with debris, forcing water into the soil. The hillside began to saturate from the inside. There were no visible cracks or warning signs on the street. As the broadcast continued, the camera captured subtle movement along the hill face. A section near the top slumped first, sending a wave of mud downward. Within seconds, the entire slope released. Soil, rocks, and broken vegetation rushed toward the road, moving rapidly downslope. The slide struck the back of the store directly. The rear wall failed inward under pressure. The roof buckled and collapsed. The front of the structure remained briefly intact as the interior filled with debris. The camera view was partially obscured by dust and rain, but the collapse was clearly visible. De la Cruz, Ramirez, and Flores were buried beneath a dense mix of wet soil, broken concrete, and roofing material. The debris settled quickly, compacting under its own weight. No voids remained large enough to allow airflow. The road disappeared beneath mud, cutting off immediate vehicle access. Emergency crews already operating in the area redirected toward the site. Excavation was slow due to unstable ground and continuing rainfall. Hand tools were used at first to avoid triggering further collapse. The buried section was reached after significant material had been removed. Medical assessment found no signs of breathing or circulation in all three victims. There were no major external injuries consistent with high-speed impact. Clothing and airways were packed with fine soil. The victims died from asphyxia secondary to traumatic burial, caused by airway obstruction and thoracic compression. Post-mortem findings were consistent with mechanical asphyxia, where inhalation of soil and debris obstructed the upper airways, and external pressure on the chest wall prevented adequate lung expansion. This led to acute hypoxic respiratory failure, rapid loss of consciousness, and death within minutes due to oxygen deprivation. Santos and the camera operator were not physically injured. The live feed was terminated during the response and later reviewed by station management and authorities. The footage became part of the official incident record used by local disaster agencies. A geotechnical assessment concluded that prolonged rainfall, blocked drainage, and unreinforced slope modification caused the failure. The store had been constructed without a retaining wall or setback from the hillside. The slide originated above the structure and was not triggered by vibration or human activity at ground level. In the weeks that followed, the barangay cleared the area and relocated remaining residents from the slope. Local officials marked the zone as high risk and prohibited rebuilding along that stretch of road. The station revised its storm coverage guidelines to require a greater distance from hillsides and cut slopes during live reporting. Thank you for watching. Click here for more videos.